My name is Sarah for today. God does things in unexpected ways. I want to tell you about Jesus of Nazareth. He has just entered Jerusalem. Big deal, you say. People come and go from Jerusalem all the time. So what's the big deal? It's different this time. And I am profoundly changed and disturbed by it. See, I am the eldest daughter. Both of my parents are very religious Jews. And for a long time, I was the only child before the miracle of my younger brother's birth. Now, because my parents thought that they would not be able to have any more children, Papa took me aside when I was younger, and he taught me the Torah. He told me I was a quick learner. See, normally girls do not have this opportunity to learn from their papa, but he wanted to pass on the faith to his children. That was all before my brother was born, and he had the opportunity after me. So like everyone else in Jerusalem, I've been hearing talk about this man named Jesus from this town up north called Nazareth. And I started paying attention when people shared stories about some of his miracles and these crazy things that he said. A blind man right here in Jerusalem, he started seeing again. There was a cripple down in Bethsaida, and he got up carrying his mat with him on the Sabbath. You should have seen the holier-than-thou types huffing and puffing over that one. There is talk that at least 3 people came back from the dead. Jesus rescued them. A 12-year-old girl, a young man, and his good friend Lazarus. A lot of his healings seem to have some kind of moral attached to it, as if it's an enacted lesson. Something that we were supposed to understand in this whole thing. It had some kind of deeper meaning. He would say, "The one who has ears to hear, let him hear," he would say. Now, Jesus travels around with his small group of devotees, but the crowds are not far behind, although they're really only there for the show. Jesus wasn't getting a lot of attention from the Roman authorities. But our Jewish leaders, they were definitely getting bothered by his bold statements. Now, the hardest part is that he seems to talk in riddles. But since I have not been in the crowd when he was talking, who's to say why people don't understand what he is saying? I think it is because he says things that are unexpected. Then earlier today, when Jesus came riding into Jerusalem, you should have seen the crowds. It was a mob. They were shouting and chanting and waving their palm branches. You would have thought he was famous. But he was different. His face, his countenance, he wasn't fazed by all this adulation. He had a more important purpose that he was reflecting on. And it's that, more than anything else, that sears into my memory. He appeared so resolute, so determined. Now here was this big crowd, frantic to get close to Jesus, as if all the palm waving and the shouting would make their hopes even more real, even more concrete. It's funny, it's actually kind of sad that around our family dinner table, all we do is argue about who Jesus is. See, my mama is what people would call a zealot. She likes to pore over the words of the prophet Daniel, who seemed to speak in pictures and cryptic and confusing thoughts about what we can expect. It's bewildering, really, because Mama is convinced that we have in Jesus an ordinary person being called to an extraordinary task. Now, she really hates those Romans and how Herod is colluding with them for power. Now, although she would not personally wield a sword, I watch her eyes glimmer with excitement when those stories of the rabble-rousers in town tell their stories. She tries to hide that from me. But I know where her hope lies: complete political change. Now, I don't blame her one bit, but I would say she was disappointed by Jesus. See, her expectations that he would ride into Jerusalem on a war horse with a chariot, well, that was shot down. She has this verse from Jeremiah memorized too, and I've heard other zealots share it. It goes like this, Jeremiah 17:25. I don't have it memorized, unfortunately. And then there shall enter by the gates of this city kings and princes who sit on the throne of David, riding in chariots and on horses, they and their officials, the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. So, this morning when Jesus showed up here at Jerusalem riding a donkey, the whispers around the group were more like grumbling. They thought Jesus looked weak. Some of them were in the crowd shouting at the top of their lungs because the excitement that this person really might be the one gave expression to all of that exuberance, and now they are not so sure. I saw them going away, kind of dejected, because Jesus didn't have much of an established retinue. Where are all the other people? Swords, weapons. See, Jesus' fan club showed up looking for him for a show of strength. They looked to him to project a vision of how to conquer those Romans, but they left feeling disappointed, I think. I suppose Jesus will be able to bounce back after this very weak showing and be able to convince his zealot followers that he can still accomplish greatness. He did not project strength and seemed humble. We shall see, I guess. But then there's my papa, who has a totally different take on Jesus. Sure, he recognizes the long wait for the right kind of rulers who will see God as king. That's the way it was meant to be, he says. He reminds them that even after being exiled and then being allowed to return, we were still in exile. Oh, it just continued. Papa has been waiting for the day that God is the king and the temple is fully restored and Torah is followed completely. And we are not there yet. He's been waiting for God to act decisively, to put our enemies down. And he cautions patience and this deeper hope. He is more skeptical, even a little bit cynical, I would say. And at the same time, he thinks a lot and he prays. And his main beef is not with the Romans, but with the ruling priestly family, the Hasmoneans, and Caiaphas in particular. And while my mama likes to quote Jeremiah, Papa references Zechariah, specifically 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. And this makes me think of what happened today, because that is what Jesus actually did. He was apparently very specific about needing a young donkey, not a war horse, but a donkey. And that kind of reminds me of one of our really good kings, King David. See, God does things in unexpected ways. And although Jesus may appear weak, that doesn't mean that he can't accomplish something great. The more I reflect on it, the more I think my zealot mother is only going to be disappointed by Jesus. He certainly has the determination, but I don't think he's going to be a war hero, someone like Judas Maccabeus, who threw off those Greek oppressors for 100 years. Sure, there was the same kind of jubilation, the same kind of waving of palm fronds, but I get the impression that Jesus is different. And although he might appear to be weak, I think Jesus has some surprises up his sleeve. So I would tell my mama, just because Jesus looks humble doesn't mean that God has not highly exalted him, bestowed on him a name that is above every name. In fact, this Palm Sunday, I am ready to expect the unexpected in our God and trust this Jesus who himself is humble and obedient, maybe even obedient to the point of death. Death on the Romans' favorite implement, the cross. It could happen. I saw Jesus' face, and he looks determined to live beyond our small understanding. My hope is stirred up, and I plan to watch Jesus this week, to watch for the unexpected. I recommend you do too.